Hi, I'm Eve with The Baby's Booty, and today what we're going to do is delve into a mistake that I made and show you some things to pay attention to before you take a customer's order. One of the things that this specific customer asked for is embroidery on hoodies, right? Simple enough. We all know how to embroider front chest logos on a hoodie, which I was able to do. 4 of these, 2 were black hoodies and 2 were these cream colored hoodies. The black hoodies had white writing, the cream colored had black writing. All right, so now that we've embroidered on the hoodies, the second part to what the customer wanted was to have embroidery here on the cuff. All right, so the customer told me sleeve embroidery. She even sent me a mock-up of where she wanted the embroidery on the sleeve of the hoodie. Now, she asked for the embroidery. I agreed. I said, yes, we can embroider on sleeves. There is an extra charge because we're hooping one time for the front chest logo, and then we're hooping again for the sleeve of the sweatshirt. She sends the logo. I confirmed the size. The size of the sleeve logo is barely 2 inches by 2 and 2.6. I'm sorry, 1.8, something like that, by 1.6. So it's almost square, and it's a profile of a panda bear. So I was like, okay, cool. We can embroider that as well. So this brings me to answer the question, can you embroider on sleeves? The answer to that question is a resounding yes. You can definitely embroider on sleeves. I'm sure you've seen all kinds of embroidery jobs where people have embroidered on sleeves of jackets, down pants legs, on sweatshirts, as a matter of fact, even on long sleeve t-shirts to a certain degree. But the cool thing is there are tools out there to make it a little bit easier to embroider on sleeves and pants legs and things of that magnitude. These are made for the multi-needle machine. First and foremost, we'll get to the single needles here in a moment, but these are made for the multi-needle machines, and you can get this for the 6 needle embroidery machines, the 10 needle embroidery machines, the 12 and the 15 needle embroidery machines. And these are called mighty hoops. They're magnetic hoops, right? And this is made in this shape because this is where it will go into the sleeve and do the embroidery. Actually, this part goes up in the sleeve and this lays on top to make it easier for you to embroider on a sleeve. And for later on, when I pull out the other sweatshirt, I'll show you how that works. But this particular customer didn't want it up on the sleeve. She wanted it down by the cuff, okay? And initially, I thought I would be able to do it, but it turns out I can't. All right, so I charged the customer to embroider on the sleeve, but I went ahead and refunded her her money. So actually, let's back up a quick second. I can embroider on the sleeve, but I can't. So let me explain. What I'm going to do is do a, was it this one or this one? It was this one. So what I'm going to do is hoop the sleeve, okay, and show you how you would hoop a sleeve for embroidery on a sweatshirt, okay, or on the sleeve of a shirt, and then show you the challenge that I came across, which made me determine that this job was not one that I would be able to accept, and I'll show you why I did not accept this job. Now, this particular sweatshirt, let me show you really quickly on this shirt, which is the shirt that I've decided not to do the work for, and show you how this would work. Of course, you would have stabilizer to go on here up under your embroidery, and we normally use cutaway stabilizer because cutaway stabilizer will maintain the integrity of the stitches better without tearing away. But it's entirely up to you what you would like to use. So the hoop, as you can see, the imprint of it the back side of the hoop receptor part is in the sleeve. All right, and we'll pretend that we have stabilizer in here. Now, if this is the wrong position to embroider on the outside of the sleeve, because generally when a person wants embroidery on a sleeve, generally they would want it going down the outside of the sleeve so that that can be seen. And of course, going down the outside of the sleeve, look, here's the seam coming from the neckline. So you would follow that line and embroider so that right here on this meaty bicep is where the embroidery generally would be. But I'm just showing this for demonstration because you can see the sleeve here is big enough for us to fit the inside of the hoop. But that still doesn't technically mean we can embroider on it. We'll get into that in a moment. All right, so with a mighty hoop, here's the other side to the hoop. I have it where my longer section is hanging off here, and then you snap it in place. And of course, see, it's kind of floppy because number one, I don't have the stabilizer, and number two, it's not in here, you know, snug. Now, whenever you hoop a garment like this that has a stretchy nap, you want to make sure that you don't stretch and pull and stretch this fabric. It'll have the stabilizer underneath, but this fabric we want to be taut, but we don't want it tight. You don't want to pull it tight. You don't want to stretch your fibers. That's how puckering starts. Okay, so first and foremost, this is how it would look, and then you would feed the sleeve into the embroidery machine from the neckline down into the embroidery machine, and then this part would fit on the arm of the embroidery machine, and this is where we would embroider, right? Easy peasy mac and cheesy. So that's how the mighty hoop works. Like I mentioned, it's very simple to use, very user friendly. But if you don't have mighty hoops, take heart. It's okay. You can use regular hoops with your sleeve embroidery, and I have a couple of examples. This one is a 4x4. This hoop goes to my 6 needle embroidery machine. Same principle. You would use this on the inside and then this to the outside, and you would fit it snug in the hoop the exact same way we did with the mighty hoop. The only difference is this is going to wedge down to the inside and by tension hold everything in place, non-magnetic. Here are the ones for my 15 needle embroidery machine, and as I mentioned, the sleeve logo on the cuff was barely 2 inches by 2 inches, and this is a 3-inch round hoop. Okay, so my line of thinking, okay, well, this is the smallest I have, so I should be able to use it. Now I do have this one, which is I think 2 inches, 2.5 by 1 and 1.6. So it's possible I could have used this now that I'm looking at it, but I decided not to use this. And the reason why I decided not to use it is because of this with my 6 needle machine. I can't tell you how many shirts I've done with this screw sticking out the back, and the screw rubbed a hole in my garment. So I don't use this very much at all. Do I use the hoops that came with that machine? But at any rate, so back to this one. To show you what I originally assumed, let's loosen this a good bit. Okay, so here's the inner ring, and I'm not going to use stabilizer right now because all I'm doing is showing you how this would transpire ordinarily. So one of two things: you can either fit it in through the sleeve, or you can fit it in through the neckline. And this is not the shirt that I did initially. No, it's not the shirt I did initially. So let's go to the shirt that I did initially. This one is a medium, and that one is a 2X. Just pointing out things that you want to not take for granted when it comes to doing the embroidery. And this one, you actually can see where the needle went in, so I'm gonna have to steam that before I take this to the customer. My first clue actually should have been that the hoop doesn't even fit inside the sleeve. That should have been my first clue. It wasn't, but stretching it gets it in there. So I was like, okay, well, we can do this. All right, and she wants it right on the cuff of the sleeve, on the inside wrist. Okay, so our hoop is there, and we want to put, again, cutaway stabilizer here. And I want to be sure, because what I was going to do was feed the machine in from the sleeve, but I'm not going to be able to do that because this isn't wide enough for the arm of the machine, and I'll show you that in a moment. So I had to feed it in that way. So we'll go ahead and hoop the sleeve as if I was going to embroider it. That's a little too loose, so let me tighten this back up. Tighten it up some. Let's see. That might be a little too loose. No, that's good. Okay. So we have our sleeve hooped. I can get it hooped. Here's the back. Here's the inside. And she wanted it like maybe 2 inches from the actual cuff seam itself. So somewhere in here, forearm, is where she wanted the embroidery to be done. So let's take this over to the machine, and I'll show you the challenge that I ended up having with hooping this and getting it to stitch out on the machine. Here we are at the machine, and I'm going to feed the arm, the embroidery, sewing arm, up into the neck of this garment. Now this is a multi-needle machine, not your single needle machine, but I'll show you what you can do to accomplish this on a single needle machine here in a moment. All right, so I've slid and fed the entire sleeve up into the sewing arm, and here I have the arm attached. Let me take this off so that I can show you what I didn't pay attention to, and I almost messed up this shirt. Notice it's hooped. Okay, there's the underside of the hoop that you can see through the sleeve, but look at the underside. Okay, so the underside, I bunched it up into the sleeve of the shirt, but it still needs to come around where the bobbin is. Okay, so now the sleeve is completely encased, but look, you can see the imprint of the bobbin case here in the sewing arm, and come on the inside and look at how tight that clearance is in there. So it's so tight that I can't pinch an inch right here. So what's going to happen is, once this starts to sew, once it starts to stitch and do this embroidery, it's going to try to move side to side and do the embroidery all in this area. Not quite that big, but right in this area. But it needs to be able to move. If I can't pinch an inch here, then it's not going to give here, and it's going to throw off the embroidery. It'll throw off the registration. It'll break a thread, which is what happened, which is why my light is flashing there, because I tried to stitch it and it broke a thread as I was trying to stitch this on this specific shirt earlier. So I had to come to the realization that I did not quote this properly. I didn't take this into consideration, the location of where she wanted the embroidery, whether or not the sleeve was even big enough to do the embroidery, yada yada. Okay, now as a for instance of a difference to show you what I can do is show you on my jacket, which my jacket is a 9 times out of 10 this is a 2X because it's super floppy on me. But if I bring this into my sleeve, which my jacket is dirty, oh my gosh, that's crazy, and around the same area, I'll hoop it, right? This time I can go in through the sleeve, even though, hold on, I put my thing upside down. So let's spin it. That's the one. This is a cool feature of these round hoops. If it's off center, off not quite straight, then you can twist it to make it straight. How cool is that? All right, so now that I have this in the right orientation, I can go ahead, because this notch on my machine, there's a notch up in there, so that's why I had to turn it around. And go ahead and put this on the machine. Now, let's get you down so that you can see what I'm going to show you. And I've been painting too, so that's why there's paint on there. But you can barely see this. This right here is the bobbin case, and you can barely see it. And I have so much room right in here to move it around and to play and whatnot. So this, yes, I can embroider on the cuff of my sleeve, because my sleeve is much bigger. So without paying attention to this and realizing what I should have quoted to the customer, I'm gonna move this camera so that you can see what I should have quoted to the customer was, yes, I can embroider on the cuff if the shirt is of a certain size, if the cuff fits my embroidery machine. So if she had initially only brought me like extra large or 2X size shirts, and I quoted her and says, yes, I can do this job, I can embroider on it, but then later the designer comes back and she says, well, I also want to do a children's line, so I want it on the children's sleeve too. I'm in trouble. If a size medium sweatshirt wouldn't fit on this machine, then a child size shirt definitely will not fit on your machine, and it won't work. But that's not all bad news. That's not all bad news. For some of you, you can achieve this, and I'll explain why I'm saying some of you. Even single needle users can actually embroider on the cuff of the sleeve, and I'll explain to you how. Okay, so give me one moment. Let me get you back over to the cutting table. So we're back at the cutting table, and what I want to show you is how you actually can embroider on the sleeve of this. Although it's too small for my multi-needle machine, technically it's not. And the same method that I'm about to show you, you can use to embroider on a single needle flatbed machine. And you'll be able to do the sleeve. All right, so for those of you with the single needle machines, it can be embroidered regularly on a single needle machine, as long as you have enough room in this neckline to open it up and flatten it on the embroidery machine like this, so that there's nothing on the back side hindering your embroidery area, so that you don't embroider the sleeve closed. Okay, so you kind of have to finagle it, lay it just so, get it flat, make sure there's nothing back here other than your stabilizer, and you can float it and pin it to the hoop, and but again, make sure nothing's back here, and embroider directly on the sleeve. But an easier way to be able to accomplish that, as well as how I technically could embroider this on that multi-needle machine, and some of you can, is if I take the seam out of the sleeve. Okay, so let me show you where I'm talking about. This is the front of the shirt, right? And we're gonna follow just your regular line down the seam of the arm and take out probably from here, maybe even all the way up to the cuff, but not past the cuff seam line, and open it up probably like about 5-6 inches. Okay, and then with that open, that kind of gives the machine a little bit more room, but technically it doesn't, because the sleeve still has a cup, so it'll make it more difficult to do on if feeding it through the arm of the embroidery machine. So we would have to again feed it from the neckline in order to open that up, and you be able to embroider on the cuff of a sweatshirt. Now, for me, I do some sewing, I do, but this is a customer's garment, a designer's garment actually, and I'm already gonna have to do some steam here where I stitched earlier, trying to go ahead and stitch it anyway to see if I could get it to work. So it only got maybe 40 stitches in, and it was like, yeah, no, I can't. I don't want to do this. So I took the stitches out. So I'm gonna have to steam that to get rid of that first and foremost. But secondly, I am very capable of taking the stitches out and stitching in this back. Two things. Number one, I don't know if this is going to a customer, my designer customer, and I don't want to cause a problem, like maybe stitch it back, even though I'm following a seam line that's already there. But I'm paranoid to a certain degree. I like for things to be just so. So I would like to do for myself or for someone I know who wouldn't be super picky first before I were to do it for this customer, which this is a new customer for me. So I need to make sure there won't be any issues. Second, I charged her for the embroidery for the front chest. I charged her for the sleeve embroidery, and that was it. I did not charge her for the cost of taking this seam out, opening it up, stitching it, putting it back together, putting it inside out, stitching it just so all the way back, and hopefully stitching it back where it would match the rest of the seam on the shirt. Okay. So those are the two factors that caused me to say, you know what, hey customer, I appreciate the order. However, this is the reason why I couldn't do it, and I'll just refund you the money for embroidering on that part of the shirt, and we'll call it even. And she was okay with that, thank goodness, because there were a lot of complications with this specific order that had nothing to do with me. But the order is now done, and I'll be taking this to her tomorrow. This particular customer, I'll meet her. So I wanted to run through that with you guys. A quick video, nothing super fancy, super elaborate, no actual live embroidery done, but to let you see how sometimes we can accept jobs without really paying attention to all the little details. That's something I should have caught. I should have caught that when she said, I have an embroidery request and the cuff of the sleeve is something I want embroidered. I should have caught that. I should have made sure that I said it's going to depend on the size of the sleeve and whether or not it will fit my machine. And one of the other things I think for my future reference, what I'll probably do is measure this cuff, and make sure that anytime I get an embroidery request, that the size of the diameter of any job from now on isn't going to be this size or smaller. And then I'll know, hey, you know, what's the diameter of it? If it's this size, I can't embroider it on my embroidery machine without taking the thing apart, and you'll have to pay for that. So at any rate, I want to let you learn from my mistake and see how you can overcome that, and you can do the embroidery on a single needle machine as well as a multi-needle machine successfully. But it's a two-step process, and that second process will involve a sewing machine so that you can put it back together. But at any rate, that was a lot. But it wasn't a lot. It was just bite-sized information, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And that's designed to help you with your business or your embroidery jobs for that matter. Whenever you come across a small area that a customer wants embroidered, or that you're trying to embroider, how to possibly overcome that, and something to pay attention to whenever you get a special request from a customer or from a family member or whatever. Even if you want to embroider in a narrow area to help you make the decision whether or not that's a job you want to take or not. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Again, I'm Eve with The Baby's Booty, and I hope you have happy embroidering.